Zombies!
Hello everybody and welcome to today's video where we are investigating some of Telltale's delisted games and also platinum trophies. These games are unavailable to purchase digitally and some are even unavailable physically, but I'll touch on that a little more later on. If you love platinum trophy content or just gaming in general, you're now legally obligated to subscribe, and don't forget to like the video while you're here.
ただし絶対俺に逆らうなよお前ら
I welcome you to join me on finding out what games are delisted in today's video, and I promise you there are some hidden gems in here that I didn't even know about. So our first delisted title today is none other than Back to the Future. This was originally released all the way back in 2010, and when I saw an anniversary edition in 2015 for PS4 and Xbox One, I had to pick it up. The game debuted to fairly good reviews, being mostly favourable by users. I'm sure longtime fans of the franchise are really excited for this title, and if you're just hearing about this now, you may want to prepare your bank balance as copies range from £65 all the way to £200 for mint in box.
I don't think you have the facilities for that, big man.
This game was eventually delisted towards the end of 2018 following the original closure of Telltale Games. In terms of the gameplay of this game, you can certainly tell that it's an older Telltale game. It does play quite well for the most part, taking in consideration its age. I personally wasn't a fan of how they really lent into it being a point and click kind of game opposed to more of a walking simulator style that the later games have. It did have some frame rate issues for me, alongside some of the mouths not being synced up while characters were talking.
Which is where I came in.
I can't really say that I'm the biggest Back to the Future fan either, but as a kid I did enjoy the movies. This game is set 6 months after the last movie and tries to act somewhat as a follow-up and almost as a fourth installment to the franchise. However, midway through, this game kind of spirals out of control with some of the story points and also loses its focus.
Boobies!
It really felt like I was trying to understand the complicated MCU multiverse with the amount of timelines that were introduced in this game. I'm very shocked to say this, but there were quite a few fetch quests which were given, and the style of gameplay was just really slow and annoying, so at the best of times you don't like doing fetch quests, and to have to do them in a Telltale game sucked quite a lot. Without ruining the later episodes and ultimately the ending of the game, I felt that the game fell a bit short and didn't seem genuine from a character perspective. While this is an adventure title, there are a lot of puzzles to complete, and me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of puzzles in games. I guess the saving grace was that they weren't that difficult, alongside there being a hint system built in the menu to help. In terms of navigating the game, I did get stuck a few times, as it was unclear of where I needed to go and what I really needed to do. You move really slowly in this game, so it can be frustrating wandering around an area trying to figure out what to do. To sum up this game, I can't help but draw a comparison to the drawing of a horse meme. It started off fairly well and then slowly declined as you got further into the game. If you're a huge Back to the Future fan, I'm sure you'll probably like this installment, but as a very casual fan, I can only say it was good. It wasn't my favourite Telltale title, but I can appreciate it. So talking about the trophies of the Back to the Future game and obtaining that platinum trophy, this game had one of the more unique trophy lists that I've had. In comparison to other Telltale games which would normally be very simple, this game you have to do quite a lot. For the most part, the trophies do revolve around you beating the game. However, it's not really that simple. While you can complete the game in one playthrough, alongside it being rated a 2 out of 10 difficulty estimate, there are a lot of missable trophies, and if you want to go back and get any, you'll be required to replay the entire episode you missed a trophy in. Each episode will have a minimum of 5 missable trophies, which will relate to completing certain tasks or specific dialogue options. While I do recommend blind playthroughs, it's probably worth having a guide open so you are aware of the missable trophies that occur, as some can be really obscure. My platinum review. I do have to say that this is probably one of the worst Telltale games I've ever had to platinum, purely because of how complicated the trophy list can be with the missable trophies. For reference, it will take you around 10 hours to complete the game and also pop the platinum trophy. By all means, this is probably one of the longest experiences I've had with a Telltale game, and not in a positive way either. If the story was slightly shorter, I maybe wouldn't have had such a stale reaction, but the game did drag on and kind of overstayed stayed its welcome for me. Maybe if you are really into the films and its universe, 10 hours of gameplay could be an absolute dream for you, but sadly for me it wasn't. Would I recommend this Platinum Trophy? Not really, and this is coming from somebody that loves Telltale games. It's quite long and it's quite boring in my opinion, let alone the really high price tag that it will set you back. Maybe if the game was a lot cheaper I could recommend this suffering, but for upwards of £65 I can't really justify such a boring and almost complicated trophy experience. Our second delisted title of the day is Guardians of the Galaxy. I was really not expecting to see a Marvel crossover with Telltale. I really couldn't believe this, and I had no idea this game even existed until researching games for this video. Guardians of the Galaxy was released back in 2017 and again followed an episodic approach of new episodes every month. In terms of the delist date, from my research I can see that the game started disappearing from digital storefronts around 2019 following Telltale's original closure in 2018. Again, this game is fairly well regarded within the community and has generally favourable review scores as well. In terms of purchasing this game in 2024, you do need to be careful that you don't get scammed. And by that, I mean you can purchase episode 1 on the disc for around £8, but that is no good if you want to play the entire game and get the Platinum Trophy. What you'll need to make sure that you buy instead is the entire game that says Season Pass disc on the front. This will probably set you back around £15 for the entire game, which I think is fairly reasonable. This includes all of the episodes, which then will download from the game's main menu. It does feel a little bit dodgy, and I didn't know if I could even download the other episodes because they were online, but rest assured that I did this method earlier this year in 2024, and by putting the disc in it lets you download the other episodes, so it's all good for getting the platinum. In terms of the gameplay for this game, it was super unique, and admittedly it did take me a second on how to work out how to control Star-Lord, as his movement can be kind of janky at first. If I'm honest, the opening gameplay sequence for me wasn't the best, however after sticking it out it did get better. Star-Lord's movement is one of the coolest gameplay mechanics that I have seen in a Telltale game, but it's just a shame that it took a moment to understand it properly. I think the issue with the movement stems from you being limited by the camera angles, which interrupts the overall flow of the movement. At the start of the game you're expected to explore an area and complete a puzzle. To complete this puzzle you enter a detective-like mode, but it wasn't really clear what I needed to do nor click on. But after I wasted some time I found out what I needed to do. It was a cool concept, but it just didn't land for me, unfortunately. Again, as mentioned earlier, I don't really like puzzles in games, and this wasn't the best start to the game for an introduction in my opinion. The conversations within this game felt really organic and allowed you to connect with the cast. Some dialogue options were time-based and of course affected aspects of the story. One awesome surprise in this game is that Nolan North actually voices Rocket, which I didn't even realise the first time playing.
Almost killed us with that thing.
Well, I didn't count on you crashing the ship into a friggin' planet!
The QTEs within this game were also quite enjoyable as they were combined with some really awesome fight scenes. The game integrated some flashback sequences as well, which again I'm not normally the biggest fan of, but in this game I believe they got it just right, as it actually added depth to the story and it didn't go on for too long. It was short and it was sweet. While this game was fun, I do understand it is really hard to capture the essence of the movies.
Dance off, bro! Me and you!
It felt like Telltale was stuck between trying to replicate the movies and also trying to be unique with their usual gameplay style. For me, the game fell somewhere in the middle. If Telltale tried to stay true to themselves and replicate previous successes, maybe the game would have fared slightly better. Of course, it would be financially impossible to get the actual movie cast to voice the entire game alongside some of the songs that they may use in the movies as well. It'd be very expensive. In terms of the characters of this game, again, they fell into that void, as I mentioned earlier, of trying to replicate the movie but also trying to want to be unique. For instance, Star-Lord wasn't that funny and his line delivery was pretty poor in this.
Peter, are you injured? Say something.
Oh, my spine. It is in so many more pieces now.
Whereas in the films his delivery is great. If Telltale adopted this movie-like voice acting or I guess dialogue options, the game would have been a lot more better and I guess truer to Star-Lord's representation in that, which works well. One aspect of Star-Lord's character that was really good, however, was the emotion he delivered during important scenes, which was really good to see, as I feel that Telltale thrive when they deliver important emotional scenes.
I'm sorry.
I did what I thought was best. I didn't think that...
I am Groot.
The pacings of the episodes were kind of weird. The first episode starts out really strong and then the other episodes start to decline in quality, and I did lose a little bit of interest before it started picking up again in episode 4 and ultimately season 5 being fantastic. The main villain of this game is pretty boring, and I feel like that's why the game falls a little bit short in the middle. The motivations are pretty boring and also lack a bit of substance. In terms of the soundtrack, I felt that Telltale tried to capture the essence of the movies, but the execution wasn't always the best. There were a handful of songs that worked really well with the QTEs, but for the most part, the soundtrack didn't really capture the film's essence. It felt like an imposter almost. Despite these critiques, the gameplay and story were still decent in my opinion. In terms of the trophy breakdown for this platinum, it pleases me to say that the trophy list is really straightforward and plays like your usual easy Telltale game. This platinum is a 1 out of 10 and it will probably take you around 6 to 7 hours to get the platinum. It's super easy and just enjoy yourself with this one. Now for the big question. Is Telltale's Guardians of the Galaxy worth platinuming? Despite my critiques and it not being my favourite Telltale game, I still think it's a good game overall. If you are a fan of Marvel and or Guardians of the Galaxy, I think you owe it to yourself to at least try this game out. With such an easy platinum on offer with no missable trophies, I would say that this platinum is worth going for. Again, this game currently at the time of recording is fairly cheap to pick up physically, so I'd recommend that, unlike the Back to the Future title, which can be quite expensive for a game. I feel like this game is cheap enough for if you still don't enjoy the experience, you don't feel like you've lost out.
Ah, nothing says success like finally being lazy.
Our next delisted entry is a 2-for-1 deal, and by that I mean the Minecraft Story Season 1 and also Season 2. Minecraft Season 1 story was released all the way back in 2015 and again was delisted in 2019. Season 2 was released 2 years after in 2017 and again delisted in 2019. Both story modes are fairly well regarded when it comes to critic reviews and also fans. While the story may have been predictable at times, when isn't it? It's a kid's game, but it was still fun regardless. Very similar to Guardians of the Galaxy, if you want to buy this game in 2024, you need to be careful that you are buying the correct copy. Again, make sure you don't get scammed because you can purchase episode 1 only on the disc for £8, which is no good if you want to play the entire game in platinum. Just make sure that you purchase the entire game that says season pass disc on the front. This will probably set you back around £15 for the entire game. In terms of picking up both of the games, they probably average between £15 to £25 for each copy. So in total, you could be looking at £50 for 2 games potentially. But again, if you shop around on eBay, you'll be able to find yourself a good deal. In terms of the trophy breakdowns, the platinums are fairly easy to get. Both games are a 1 out of 10 and will take you around 8 to 10 hours a piece. Do note that in Season 1 there are 2 trophies, each relating to a story specific choice, meaning that you'll need to reload your game at the end of episode 1 in chapter 6 in order to see both choices. I'd recommend playing the game through normally and then reloading an old save to clean up that last trophy. The gameplay in both of the games is nothing to write home about besides it being a good Telltale standard of game, which is awesome. The gameplay is simple to play and it does remind me very much of the Walking Dead games, but it's just aimed at kids a little bit more. By all means, it's a lot simpler, and while there are the odd puzzles thrown in there, they again are pretty simple. The aspect of both games that sticks out to me is how they introduce each episode. There's normally a really cool cinematic scene that will occur, sometimes with QuickTime events, and I think it was just done perfectly. The intros to the games always looked pretty epic, and I was always excited to start a new episode. In terms of the story, it did feel very meh for me at times. There were some good parts and there were some bad parts. I think my main issue is the length of both games. They did seem like they went on for a bit longer than they needed to. Season 2 provided somewhat of a continuation on from Season 1, but shifts into its own story within its own right, which was pretty cool. While Season 1 was good, you can most definitely argue that Season 2 is better as they refined and improved many aspects of the game, for instance the combat, which was improved for Season 2. And I should note as well that the dialogue was a lot funnier and also didn't feel as forced in the second season.
I believe the scientific word for it is poop. It's what I slipped on. Aha, sure.
Overall, both games were decent entries in my opinion, but the big question is, are the Minecraft story games worth platinuming? These games are probably the rare occurrence of where I don't actually know the answer, and it is really down to your own personal preference. While the games weren't inherently bad, they did feel very long and draining. Yes, they are easy platinums and good games. I think that my recommendation is to not do what I did and rush through both of them in a short space of time back to back. I do think they are worth getting as they do have enjoyable stories, it's just whether you want to sit through them both. I would recommend doing the first season, taking a bit of a break, maybe playing another game and then moving into season 2 is probably the optimal way to achieve these trophies. And finally, our last delisted installment is The Wolf Among Us, and boy am I excited to yap about this one. The Wolf Among Us originally released in 2013 and then again in 2014 for PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Now this is where things do get confusing, as Telltale closed in 2018 like I've mentioned and the games were delisted between 2018 and 19, The Wolf Among Us was affected by this. However, since the studio has reopened and also confirmed Season 2 of The Wolf Among Us, the game is now available to purchase again on digital storefronts. The Wolf Among Us is a rare instance of an almost perfect game when it comes to being scored among critics and fans. Something super interesting is that there is actually comics related to this title which falls within the DC Fable series, which is super cool. If you know more about The Wolf Among Us, please let me know down below. Regardless of it now not being delisted, I still really just wanted to talk about this game because it was so good. In terms of the trophy breakdown, The Wolf Among Us is rated a 1 out of 10 and is expected to take you around 10 hours to complete, being one of the longer Telltale games. The only difference in comparison to some of the other games is that there are collectibles that you'll need to look out for when playing this game. You will need to collect Book of Fable entries in each episode, so you will need to rewind the episodes by reloading an earlier save in order to collect them all. It does sound quite daunting, but if you follow a good guide, this will be super simple, and this was one of my concerns when going for the Platinum Trophy. I was worried that the collectibles would be really complicated, but there are some really good comprehensive guides out there, so rest assured it is a 1 out of 10 and it is really easy to get that platinum. Please don't be worried about that. In terms of the gameplay, The Wolf Among Us really does remind me of the original Walking Dead games from Telltale. This title really captures the essence of what Telltale can do when they're at their best. This game plays like a detective game where you're investigating a murder with light puzzles and also important dialogue choices that actually matter. This title really thrives from your dynamic choices which ultimately affect the story. Something again that I really loved with the original Walking Dead games. Your choices really do matter. The game plays really well, the story is exciting and interesting, and visually the game also looks fantastic. Most notably, the opening intro sequence of each episode just looked amazing, and the soundtrack is also very fitting and helps immerse you into the world. So, is The Wolf Among Us worth platinuming? Yes, 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 and more yeses. If you can do it twice, do it twice. If you can do it 3 times, do it 3 times. If you can do it 4, okay, I'll stop. But you get my drift. This platinum was fantastic. I loved every single second of it. Please do go and platinum this game if you haven't already. I can't believe that I waited so long to play this game. Growing up, I was always aware of the title from also playing the Walking Dead games. However, I pushed this game to a side because it didn't really seem interesting to me. I'm probably going to blame it on the more unique art style of the game. It kind of reminded me of like Borderlands, which as a kid I wasn't a fan of, and it just put me off a bit. But I'm really glad that I didn't play it back then, because I was right. As a teenage kid, I wouldn't have enjoyed this, and I also wouldn't have had the brain capacity to fully appreciate this title. Playing this game for the first time as an adult was such a delightful experience, and I really got a lot from the game. It truly was awesome. Despite the trophy guide being a 1 out of 10 for collectibles, the collectibles did see challenging, but I managed to complete them. Rest assured, as I mentioned earlier, if I can do it, you can also do it as well. Just pull up a guide and you can see the steps that you need to take. It's really simple. The Wolf Among Us was an awesome game, and luckily for me, and maybe you, we won't be waiting that long for Season 2.
I'll see you around, Wolf.
One bonus title which seems to have been completely lost from the face of the earth is a Jurassic Park game that was actually made by Telltale. It came out in 2011 for both PS3 and Xbox 360, and to my knowledge, I'm unsure if this game has a platinum trophy or not. There isn't too much information on the title, which is a shame. It consisted of 4 episodes, I believe, and probably played like your regular Telltale title, but it didn't score so well with critics, and maybe this game being a lost piece of media isn't the worst thing. But just on the topic of losing media and delisting games, I think this just highlights the importance of physical media, and I'm not here to pick sides and debate as that's a whole different video within itself, but it's just some food for thought that if Telltale remained closed and never reopened, all of the digital media would have stayed pulled and never relisted, The Wolf Among Us being a great example of this. Telltale games have always been digital and episodic, so they would come out monthly, and to me that's how I've always played them. I've always played them digitally, and I've always waited a month to play the next episode and sort of generate the hype for the drop and the download. Thankfully in recent years Telltale have produced physical collections of completed titles such as the season pass discs I mentioned earlier, but that still doesn't stop people from forgetting about the games. If Telltale remained closed, would we even still remember them and their games in 20 years time? Who knows? If you've enjoyed today's deep dive of the Telltale's delisted games and their platinum trophies, don't forget to drop a like on the video and also subscribe if you love platinum trophy content. I live stream on a weekly basis, normally to go through the platinum videos that you see on the channel, so I'd urge you to turn notifications on for the live streams as well, and hopefully I'll see you in one of them. With all of that said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.